Hello, and welcome to a very special limited edition of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your host, Mike. Soon you will hear from your co-host, Alex, and more importantly, you will hear from our special guest in our exclusive interview with Grass Kings creator, Hilary Jenkins. Of course, not only Grass Kings, many books, which we will cover in the interview, but we are mostly focused on getting down deep to one of the creators of Grass Kings. In this interview, we're going to reference a lot of books. We're going to reference websites where you can buy some of her indie work that's even outside of Boom and Dark Horse, where she normally publishes. And we're going to give you some links to where you can purchase original art pieces from her. All of that will be available at storiedarcs.com in the show notes for this episode. And without any further ado, we're just going to get straight into it so you can hear from the woman herself. So we'll just dive straight in and say, what is your comic background? What drew you to them? And how did you get started as a creator?
So I've been an artist forever. I went to school for it 100 years ago. And I started probably with my beginning in comics was technically Grass Kings. I did a bit of other stuff here and there before then. We used to go to cons a lot and do a lot of shows and kind of make our own stuff, but Grass Kings was probably the first big one that I worked on, and I think it started on issue 8, and Tyler had already kind of established the vibe, but he was kind of busy, and he said, well, why don't you give it a try? Why not? We'll see how it goes, and if it sticks, then we'll keep going, and it did, and I just kept rolling. So that is
kind of a bold experiment on an Eisner nominated book. To say,
yeah,
hey, let's roll the dice. Why don't we swap out the colorists and see what happens?
I know, right? But at that time, I don't think it was Eisner nom. So we were just rolling, keeping the creative stuff going. And he could see that I could offer something in it, that he was, wanting to do other things as well. So it just left space for that. And it worked out. So in the beginning, I was kind of riffing on his style, kind of trying to keep it consistent, but it did evolve over time.
Well, so I comment on that in our podcast, which you obviously have not heard because no one has yet, that in volume 3 in particular, the colors take on a completely different tone. It's kind of lively and colorful, but in volume 2, there's this investigation internally, and you kind of realize all the characters are kind of dirty. They all have kind of a dark, bleak side. And starting in issue 12, it opens up with this background into the police officer from Carlisle, and it's all kind of gray, blue. It switches to a cool color palette, and it doesn't really get as bright and shiny as the first one, where it maybe seemed like an idyllic place, the Grass Kingdom, and now it's kind of gritty, and it's like, they're not really better than us; they're just different.
The veil was coming off. That's a very intentional choice. You kind of start off with a certain shine, and then you start to see that there is quite a bit of dirt under the nails.
So I have to ask, did you handle any of the covers for Grass Kings?
I did. Yeah, okay. I did. I think I did a whole bunch of them, especially the one that really stands out to me is the boat with the birds and the water. There's that kind of lake.
Oh yeah.
Wait, let's see. I don't know which number that was, Alex.
I'm trying to find it real quick here.
So I have mine all bound into this library edition because I bought it before the really beautiful hardcovers came out.
Gorgeous.
And the cool thing is the cardstock covers serve as natural bookmarks, since they don't play well in bound format.
Yeah, you might find it fascinating, but I can picture that cover in my head. I can picture that one there.
I just didn't know if it was an A cover or a variant.
Pretty sure it was an A, but I
think it was the A. Yeah, I think in the back half of the series, I think Matt was doing those variants, and they were kind of like the
movie poster,
the dime store, the dime store, the pulp novel kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that's stunning. By the way, I didn't put this on the list, but is there a place where you sell old prints, old original art, anywhere like that where we can send people?
Absolutely. Yeah. ComicConArt.com, I think it is. Court. You want to talk to Court. He's the man. He's the rep that basically carries all the originals that Tyler does and I do with him. And so he's the guy that that has all that.
Okay, great. We'll put that in our show notes on the website along with number 13. Although I'll probably just do a cover gallery. I think I'll be able to sleuth which covers you did and just kind of group them all together.
It was a lot of fun because Tyler left a lot of space for me to let the paint run and do. And so, the covers, there was like the one with the crows on the dead tree. There was a lot of experimentation and letting that one bleed. Yeah, exactly. So all of those were a lot of fun.
Now, I'm curious. You said, obviously Grass King's probably your first long comic work, but in your, I guess, kind of other artwork, had you collaborated in the same way with Tyler on his work, or had it been like, he does his art, you had done yours? Had you guys worked together just on pieces, kind of randomly standalone things, or was Grass King's kind of the first kind of actual collaboration beyond actual storytelling collaboration?
No, we'd known each other for a very long time at that point. And we owned a company called Black Sheep Studios for a while. And we do all kinds of stuff for we work for the 2010 Olympics, and we do all kinds of pitch stuff and illustration work and all kinds of things collaboratively or individually at that point. And so it wasn't a new thing at that point.
It was just new in terms of kind of sequential art story, actual the kind of panel to panel page turn kind of storytelling, not actual collaboration in the artwork.
I mean, we've done other stuff, we've done some indie books together that were just very starting out, figuring out what that all looks like. So, but nobody's seen those, just things like that. So there was a ramp up a little bit. So it wasn't super abrupt.
Get some reps in before you get a book like this, and something on a bigger publisher with some bigger names there. Well, that's good. You can get those reps in without anyone really seeing it. And then when you show up on the scene, it looks like you've been there the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when the Beatles were in Germany. Nobody knows about that. It's
no one heard that stuff. No one heard that stuff. Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy. Maybe we should have done that, Alex. We should have just burnt the first 6 podcast episodes we did and
just recorded just in the dark.
I guess it's 5 years of talking every Wednesday at the comic shop is our getting the reps in.
That was probably It started somewhere. Yeah.
Legit. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so we read that in an interview with Tyler, which by the way are kind of hard to find. He seems recluse, but maybe not. Maybe that's just the nature of being an indie comic artist. One interview I found with him, he said that he approached Matt with the idea for Grass Kings, and really the idea was centered around a parent coping with the loss of a child. What can you recall about that or the origins of Grass Kings? And presumably that one hits close to home for you as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we've got 3 kids, and they were pretty little at the time. And we were living in the country at the time on a farm in the middle of nowhere in this really raw land. And he'd gone away for a period of time for a convention or something. And he hadn't been away from the kids that long before. And he kind of had this storyline come to his mind, which was this of what if one of the kids had passed? What if this happened? How would that feel? And then it rolled all of this kind of chaotic, raw landscape around us into it. And so most of what you see in the book were places that existed and that we were a part of. Okay. Even that really raunchy vulture kind of wooden structure where things go really sideways. We went there. It was a bird sanctuary, and we went into the sanctuary, and there were these massive eagles just eating things. And it was just like that. So
wow,
it was very pulled from reality.
That's interesting. We talk a lot about, where exactly is this located? Because the only setting is one character says they come up from Florida. So it's north of Florida. That's all we know. But it's just it's just out there somewhere. And I think we felt that was probably seemingly intentional on your guys' part, that it's not tied down to one specific area. It's not in the plains or in the mountains or anything like that. It's kind of a nebulous, but I guess clearly you had real world influence there, but it's not kind of textual on the page that this is exactly where it's located. It's more kind of in every place.
Yeah, I mean, it always is like it helps people relate when you are a bit more nebulous that way. But we did give little Easter eggs to the Canadians. Like we're in Canada. It was technically in Canada that we're talking about, but there's little Easter eggs of like the Hudson's Bay blanket on the first cover that he's got wrapped around him. There's little bits that if you see it, you'll know it from these areas.
Yeah, way over our heads.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That if you know, you know. But if you're a silly American like Mike and I, then maybe not.
But it's all good. It could be Montana, like it's all good.
I think we mentioned that as well. Somewhere in the Plain States, it could be Montana, one of the Dakotas. It could be a little further south in like Missouri or something like that. I think it's open to interpretation in that way. Yeah, you can relate to it by being vague. There's a specificity in being vague and being non-specific that everyone looks at and be like, oh, I know where that is because I've seen that lake before. I've seen that mountain before. And you could be anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world and think, oh, I know a place like that. And I think it works really well to not nail it down.
Or that like weird collection of cars you saw on the side of the road when you were out of town is like, what's going on?
You look out in the distance. Yeah, there's a couple big structures out there. There's like this. People live out there, or is that just like abandoned and you don't really know about it? And you see those all over the place. I think that's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think more so even than the set, the places are the people. I have, there are times when I've met almost all of the characters here at one point or another. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I guess when I was tagging Grass Kings on Instagram, I glanced at Tyler's profile and saw him playing guitar. And he was wearing a white shirt, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, he looks exactly like one of the characters in this." I didn't know if it was autobiographical or he got to the third son of the Grass King family and just ran out of faces and was like, "I guess I'll just use my own."
You'd be shocked at how much of it was part of the life we were living. So that's I think why it really resonated. Like it was really hitting in the bones.
Yeah, and I felt like it was one of those indie masterpieces that doesn't side with a particular character. It creates an experience. And I think that's what I really love. And I think in good art and good storytelling is you've got reason to cheer for certain characters and you also see their flaws. And then in the third arc, you finally learn the backstory of the police officer from Carlisle. And you're like, oh, dang, he's a little more sympathetic than I thought he was. It doesn't excuse his behavior, but it explains it. I want to get to your specialty, especially when it comes to this, which is coloring. So our previous series, we went through Paper Girls, which is one of the most vivid, like the first issue is that bright yellow cover, which is what drew most people to the series if they weren't already Brian K. Vaughan fans. And it relies heavily on coloring for storytelling to distinguish characters, timelines, settings. And Matt Wilson, who just won an Eisner last weekend for his coloring, really carried that book. Then after Grass Kings, we've already recorded our next one, which is The Underwater Welder by Jeff Lemire, which is just black and white. And so now speaking to the colorist, what role does color play in storytelling?
As far as I'm concerned, it's massive. Like, yes, the storyline's very important. Yes, the art's all very important, but it technically is the third pillar. And it's also telling a story. It's an emotional story. It's helping alert the reader to the feelings. Like quite often I use the analogy of like in Grass Kings, especially the sky was telling you a lot. Like when we were out there, I remember the sky turned green once. And it was right before a crazy, like kind of tornado type storm. So it's kind of warning you or letting you know what the vibe of that moment is. So that's how I like to use color. I don't just passively throw it down. It's almost exhausting in how emotional it can be in supporting the story.
Yeah.
How much of that are you discussing? I mean, obviously, like I said, it helps that you're working with someone who you know so well and is right there when you're maybe coloring it. But how much of that goes into is it pre-planned between you and Tyler when he's working on a scene or gets a script or something like that? Are these things you're discussing together, or are you getting his art and working on it from there? Or Like, are you coming from it separately, or is it something you're discussing so you have kind of an idea of a plan going into a project beforehand?
Yeah, like the thing now is that I'm working on like a lot more books, and it really is it depends on the relationship you have with each writer and artist and how that system goes. But generally, like Tyler and I had worked together for so long, there was an understanding of like, this is kind of what we want to get across. If he even had to say it, I generally gather that from the script. If I read it, I always read it, but yeah, generally I gather that from the script. And if I need clarification on time of day, or, if it's not sure what's going on, I would consult the writer or the artist. But yeah, it generally comes from the written.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, I think I've heard like actors say the same thing, where they say, I try to deduce who my character is by the things that they say. Like, I'm the character who says this thing. And you have to reverse engineer from the script.
And I do that too with color. Like, I was working on a children's book that just came out with Johnny Christmas called Swim Team. And I didn't even really necessarily discuss it with him, but for me, I needed that young female character to have a favorite color, as a child would. And they wear all, a variety of things, but they generally would prefer to wear purple. Or they would generally prefer, to live in a room that, their room looks like somewhere they belong. So you kind of get those personalities rolled in, and you have like color themes for each person.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world to me. And I think that's one of those things that I think a really alert reader will pay attention to that, but everyone absorbs it passively.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's the beautiful thing about comics is you can think you're, tearing through it and just reading the caption bubbles and glancing at the pictures, but the color hits you whether you process it consciously or not.
As it should. Yeah. And when it's done properly, it can really impact the story, as it should.
And did we just ask this part of the question as well? That do you get this one script at a time, or when you started in issue 8, did you know exactly where issue 15 was ending in Grass Kings?
I don't think I knew where it was going. I generally work issue to issue, and I'll read the issue and kind of have a trajectory of what that needs to be, and then just go at it. So yeah, I don't always know the end result. Okay.
And this is a common collaboration, right? This is
Matt's the bomb. He's the sweetest guy. So yeah.
One thing we didn't have beforehand, but I'm curious of, because whenever I see a creative team that is they come together for a project and you're like, well, that was really good, and then you see them come together again and again and again, and whenever I see something like that maybe signals something to me like, well, if I missed one of those early books, maybe I should pick these up now, because these folks clearly like working together. So there must be something there. So how did you guys first get hooked up with Matt on I guess here on Grass Kings? Like, do you know how that happened? Because I mean, a lot of times you see this happen at like for hire work at like Marvel or DC. An artist, a writer gets put together, an artist, and it just so happens they click and they keep working together. And then like, hey, let's go work on our own book, like create our own book here. But here you guys are working together on a book for Boom. So do you remember how that specifically came to Matt, how you guys met for the first time?
It's a little vague now. I feel like it was like a bit of word of mouth, people who knew people and introductions, but also Tyler was looking for someone who would be interested, because it was an unusual dynamic where the artist has the storyline and kind of had an idea, and he knew he needed to partner with an awesome writer. And he kind of had pitched it to a few people like, hey, is this something you want to do? And Matt was like the awesome, he was like, yeah, sure. Let's try this. And it worked really well. And we've worked on like 4 books together since then. So yeah.
Most of those are I mean, we'll run through them real quick. People who don't know, after Grass Kings, I think the next one was Black Badge.
Yeah.
Which was my personal favorite as someone who grew up as a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
That initial elevator pitch had me hooked immediately, and then when I saw it was the same team from Grass Kings, it was even better right there. That's a incredibly fun book. Then I guess Fear Case was next, that short little miniseries.
Yeah.
And then Apache Delivery Service, which I'll admit, haven't read yet. That came out earlier this year. Haven't read that yet, but I will definitely get to that one there.
But you own them all, right?
Yes. I just haven't. Things get backed up reading wise, but again, whenever I see a team like that just work together on different projects, staying together, that's always a sign to me like, well, if they clearly like working with each other and creating and trying new things, that seems like a risk. If I've never read anything from them before, seems like a risk that I should be willing to take to read one of their books. Because if they keep putting stuff out in the world, then I got to believe that they're really in it and they really love it. So I hope there's a lot more coming for the three of you guys, because I'll buy it all. As soon as it comes out. As soon as it comes out in previews, I'm going to order it.
Thank you. That's great to know. But yeah, no, it's seriously. Tyler does some of his best work with Matt, and Matt, they have like an understanding and a wonderful language that it just works great.
Which is interesting. So I did want to ask about this, and I guess I didn't give you this one in advance. So feel free to decline or whatever. But I have to wonder what it's like to draw and color for someone who is also capable of drawing and coloring. Matt has done his own stuff too, and I think there are books where he's done only art. He obviously, you guys have a good dynamic. I would assume that means he trusts your coloring and Tyler's drawing, and he's not trying to make it look like a Matt Kint cover band or anything like that.
No, and there's a beautiful understanding of that, of like, there has been those kinds of conversations where it's like, he's very capable. I mean, he's got Department H, he's got mind management, he's like a rock star all in his own right. But that style that he does suits those stories, where the stories he's writing and he's working with Tyler on and me, it's intentionally a different, vibe that they're going for. So the style that Tyler has suits that script and suits those storylines. So it works out. He's very able to do both.
Okay. Yeah. Now, have you pitched a story to Matt yet?
No. No, good question. But no, that's not generally how my brain works. I'm not,
okay.
I don't like to consider myself part of the, like, a lot of the time color's considered like part of the production end of things, where I'm not that. I'm more of a feeling person, and that I like to make an impact on the story, but to be the idea generator isn't necessarily my strong suit.
Yeah. I think that's perfectly valid. That's like certain Beatles songs without George Martin, stitching them together in the studio. I think the craziest one is like Strawberry Fields, where John Lennon played it in two different keys. And he said, well, I want the front half of that one and the back half of that one. And George was like, you can't do that. They're in different keys. And John Lennon said, well, I'm done. You're George Martin, figure it out. And he stretched the tape out to change the pitch of one of the songs so that it matched the key of the other one, something crazy like that. So it's like, yeah, I mean, some people don't give enough credit on the production end of things. And I think that's one of the things our podcast tries to do, is say, let's look at the whole creative team, not just, the name on the front cover always. Even though your name is on the front cover, half of this. Yeah.
Well, there is always a sense, though, sometimes when people talk about comic books as a writer's medium, and it always, when I was younger, I think I was subject to this, where I would have looked at this and been like, oh, it's Matt Kint's Grass Kings, and that's a very shorthand way. And a lot of people who say that, they don't mean to be disrespectful, but it's just it's like, oh, that's just how it is. That's how you talk about comics. It's it's Brian K. Vaughan's saga. It's it's something like that. When you realize, well, no, like Fiona Staples is as big a part of that book as anything.
Absolutely.
Grass Kings doesn't exist if you don't have the art that's in it and the style that's in it. So it can't just be, let alone the fact that the idea was Tyler's, but it doesn't exist if it's just words. Like, you don't have a comic. So I think
it's primarily a visual medium.
Yeah, even though it's considered a writer's medium. So I think we want to really try to spotlight that. And one of the things that we talk about in the episode that I don't know, because I'm not an artist, don't have that skill, and definitely specifically don't really have much experience with what you guys work in these watercolors. But when I think about your style, the style that you and Tyler have, and similar artists, maybe not in style, but definitely in material. Someone like when you see what Jeff Lemire does sometimes, what Sean Phillips does with his son Jacob on the books with Ed Brubaker, that kind of watercolor style. You guys seem to be really productive. Grass Kings was 15 issues that came out on 15 straight months. Black Badge was 12 issues, 12 straight months. I mean, the same creative team, like that's unheard of. I mean, definitely unheard of in for hire work for like the big two, but even on the creator owned side, that stuff is unheard of. And I know in interviews with like Ed Brubaker, we've talked about the reason he writes so much is because he gets these pages back from Sean and Jacob. And like, he's saying, these pages are done. I need more. I need to keep working. So is there something about the medium that you guys work in that either allows you to be fast and be productive, or is it kind of like because you work in that medium, you have to be fast? There's something inherent to this watercolor style, the painting style that means you have to be fast and have to be on top of things? Or are you just guys kind of is it just how you guys work?
I think it's a bit of both. Like it is something that is on a schedule that's needing to be produced and put out on a, deadlines. So that's always there. It's always present. It's always, and being artists, there is a lot of like that pressure at the last minute of, there was a lot of like staying up all night scanning stuff and like, just because you work in spurts, but watercolor itself too lends itself to something that's not necessarily fast, but you have to keep kind of a levity and a looseness to it. And so Tyler's line work generally does also kind of, it is more European in that way. So he works kind of in a fervor of that in that way. So it's a faster approach, but not at the same time, like when it all comes together, you got this stack and it did take a chunk to get it done. Mm-hmm. But it's the hustle. And that's what I've always loved, is that we just work hard and love doing it. So we just produce.
Well, I said, I love the fact that when you guys run a book, like there are not going to be any skip months. Like I understand sometimes if you're working late at night, that can be tough on you guys. But, I love knowing that a book's going to come out if it's 12 issues and it's going to be there every month. Like I said, that's a rarity, even in the creator owned stuff. Cause a lot of times they're built-in breaks, because the whole idea is they're trying not to kill the artist. So maybe get 5 issues and you get a month off, 5 more issues. And if that's the schedule, that's the schedule. But there is something really reassuring knowing that, hey, if I'm going to get a book from Hilary and Hilary Jenkins, like it's going to be there every single month. And that kind of consistency is, I think it's a real rarity. So I think it's definitely a credit to you guys to, getting the books done, get them on time, and have them look as great as they do. It really is awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
So I've got one question that will kind of pivot into, I want to talk about some of your other favorite collaborators other than Matt, because I loved King of Nowhere, which was another.
Oh, good.
Oh my gosh, it was so trippy and weird and awesome. Just the front cover of the first one, I was like, yep, take my money. Right? Just put it on my pull list. I can even pay for it now. I don't care. But I have to wonder, so you're not the last step in the process, the lettering comes after you.
Yeah.
Now, as the colorist, do you have to factor in when you color the size of the script, how much lettering will be on that page, where ideally you would like it to be? I would imagine it's like, I can't paint or draw for anything, but if I had done this big, beautiful, watercolor thing, and then someone puts a big box on it and starts putting letters over the top of it, I would imagine I'd be very particular about where they choose to place that. Do you have input on that, or do you just trust? Is it Jim Campbell who did this?
Yeah,
one?
I think he was the one on that.
I think it was Jim. Yeah,
and it's always Jim, right? With this
a lot of the time. Yeah. He's really good at what he does.
So clearly, there's a high level of trust there. But I've always been curious: does the artist have any input on that? Does the writer, or is that totally up to the letterist?
It depends on the book, but usually, yes, especially with creator stuff. But in terms of my aspect of things, I don't generally have a say. I generally am, getting those washes to happen, getting that texture to happen, and getting those, colors down. But the planning aspect is more Tyler's responsibility, or the artist's responsibility, to have the frames staged in a way that allows for the amount of text needed. So you would kind of like give enough space if it was a talky, scene. And that's more in the line work phase.
So yeah, he's putting his lines down in a way that understands, well, that there's 3 people talking in the scene, or we know there's a big narration box here. He's going to leave a spot for it that would flow naturally down the page.
Exactly.
So by the time, that should already be done before you get to your work of coloring in, and then you're going to color however it is you're going to go. And then knowing that at some point, however the letters are going to fall, that's how they're going to fall. Correct.
I just trust that system, but there was interesting things. I mean, we are very experimental. Like King of Nowhere was crazy experimental. I was using like stencils and duct tape and coffee, and like we were just getting like nasty with it. And that was like stuff was happening. And even in Fear Case 2, Tyler would say, hey, this bathroom scene's like, it's going to be nasty. And I don't want to outline all the blood on the walls. We need some handprints here. We need some splatter. We need some like nasty stuff. And that's my favorite. I get in there with the red and I get to create that scene of horror. And so that's a playground for me in that way. But
okay, I'm now looking at Comic-Con art at the King of Nowhere things in particular, trying to find one that has something super weird on it. I would totally frame that and put it on the wall.
Not every one of them does, but there were a few where I was.
I'll settle for normal weird, but there's because there's nothing really normal about that book. Although again, you could tell that even in the midst of like weird dreamlike dystopia, there are still impressions of real places.
Yes.
That you've scouted. So I'm curious, do you keep all of that in the mind's eye, or do you carry a camera with you and think, oh, this barn would be really cool because it's got all these crows and eagles and whatever around it, and you take a picture of it? Or does that just leave a permanent impression on your brain until it comes out in a book?
The feeling itself permanently, like I'm also a painter, like I also paint just landscapes and things that for my own personal, like just enjoyment. And I don't generally paint from something unless I've taken that photo. Where with comics, though, you're forced into some pretty unusual, scenes, Tartarus being one of them, the one I did with Johnny, where you're going to other worlds. So in that way, I would reference like the sulfur mines in Africa, or like some crazy, otherworldly color themes that were still somewhat anchored in our world, but inspired by kind of collections of images that I found or searched for. So it's a bit of both in that way.
Okay. But I loved that book, and I would love to talk since we went there anyway, other collaborators that you've worked with, and I guess including this Reburn project that I just discovered today. So we love Matt Kent, but anyone other than Matt Kent that you really like working with?
Johnny's awesome. I've done 2 books with him now. Like we did Tartarus with Andrew, and then Johnny and I did Swim Team for HarperCollins, and that's a whole nother realm. Like that's the kids graphic novel realm.
Okay, I was like, there's got to be a reason I haven't heard of that.
Is that like a middle grade kind of YA?
Yeah, it's like for 8 to 12-ish age group, and it's doing really well. And it's a really important story about racism and positive self-talk and really good lessons for that age group. It's a fun one, but a very different shift from like that to Fear Case. So.
Fear Case being like your kind of Pulp Fiction meets The Ring kind of thing. I guess maybe that's
Hannibal.
Maybe not great for the 8 to 12-year-old crowd. But no, I mean that those middle grade books, those YA books, you think about a creator like Raina Telgemeier or something like that. Like those books that's such a huge market right there. One of the fastest growing markets, I think of, and I think it's really important grabbing that the younger generation, grabbing young boys, young girls, getting him used to reading in that way. So I think it's great that you got a book out there, finding that audience too. And I'm glad it sounds like it's doing well. That's awesome.
And it was a beast. Like, it's a 200 and something page book. My girls read it in like a day. They loved it. But I painted every single page. Like, it's all done in gouache, not watercolor. So that's just a different approach. But every single page is painted for that one too.
I love it. I'm looking at the preview on HarperCollins website, and there's still so much texture to the coloring.
That's
something that I in my amateur just a reader mind thought that can only really happen with watercoloring.
This one's gouache, but there is something about the analog. I mean, yes, you can simulate it digitally, I'm sure, but for me, the fun comes from the mixing of the actual colors and the physical nature of it. So that just works for my process.
I think I don't think there's anything against guys who work fully digital or fully analog, but I think there's something to be said though. Like when I think one of the reasons I picked up Grass Kings initially was seeing that art, which I had recognized from an earlier book that Tyler had done, Snowblind. I was like, that looks familiar. Like I'd seen that before. And then when you open up that first cover, it's that cardstock, and it's that that great splash page that goes inside. It continues on to the inside cover where the credits are. Like that's part of the story when you open the book up, and seeing that and just thinking like someone actually painted that. And you can see the craftsmanship there. And I'm like, you know what, that is so cool, because you don't see that as much now. And if you are going to see it, you're not going to, it's almost impossible to do that at like a Marvel or a DC because of kind of how their house style is. So when you see something like that, and when you know that someone has put the work in on to actually paint something that looks like that, and some of those great landscapes, especially early in the run of Grass Kings, they're these big, gorgeous landscapes, and just knowing that someone painted that for real.
But there's also,
I always love to see. Yeah.
At the beginning of the last issue, you have the beach in Florida as you're getting the backstory for the Hemingway character.
Yeah.
And big, beautiful landscape. And there were a bunch of these where I kept showing them to my wife, who is not really a comic reader, other than trying to build a bond with me occasionally. And she was like, well, that's great. If you bought that comic art, you could hang out in the main portion of the house. Whereas everything else is in like the man cave. So all of my comic art and signed posters and stuff are all quarantined to one area of the house. And she was like, no, these watercolors are great. You should buy one of those. And then, I looked in all of the big landscape ones. First of all, were way more money than I had to spend on it, and mostly were already sold. So I just have to jump on your next book.
Yeah.
And wait for those to pop up.
Got to get in early. On some of those.
You might not be able to hang the next one, but
Well, it's like, I'm not going to hang any Fear Case ones, I don't think.
Well, even the next, whatever, what I'm working on right now, you might not want to hang, but it's, there is, there will come.
Well, one thing we definitely wanted to ask was what you have coming down the line. Is there anything you can actually say and promote right now, or are you still kind of in the things are coming, but you can't actually say it right now?
That's kind of where I'm at. Like, I'm working on 3 books right now, but that none of them have been like released as of, what that is. So, but we're just still working continually. So, it's great that way, but nothing that's been publicly announced. So I can't really say, other than like Reburn's like the most recent production that I've done. So, but otherwise. Yeah.
And what can you tell us about that project? How did you get involved with the collaboration? It's an all-female.
It's the most wonderful team of women. It was very serendipitous. I'm like good friends with Fiona Staples, and she had posted on her Instagram, hey, Hilary has some open space for coloring gigs if anybody's looking. Which was very sweet of her. And just by chance, Allison, the writer of Reburn, her husband happened to be on Fiona's page that day. And he's like, check this out. What do you think? And we chatted and clicked. And we've been working together for almost like over a year now.
Oh, wow.
In all those books. And they're just like the most wonderful team of women. We'd have great talks. It was just like good vibes and great working together. So lucky, really lucky.
That's really awesome.
Yeah. And it's a Kickstarter. It did really well. And I mean, we've finished off at issue 4 now, and they're kind of figuring out what their next steps are. But
is it going to be maybe another Kickstarter for another arc? Is that what they're thinking? They're
considering that, or maybe even like side stories of individual characters that we're wanting to get deeper into. But yeah, it's a very dystopian, wonderful, story. So it's worth a read.
Definitely.
Are you in every issue of Reburn, or are you doing certain issues, certain panels, certain covers?
I started on issue 2. Elise did, I think, all of issue 1. Or they had I think there was maybe somebody helping with color on issue 1, but Elise did all of them, all the art. And then I came in at issue 2 and continued from there. So I've done all the coloring from there on, and some of the covers as well. Very
cool. Yeah. Well, the Kickstarter is just one more place where I need to keep track of comics.
It is, yeah.
I've never kickstarted a comic, which is crazy to me.
Oh, wow.
I only do like board games on Kickstarter.
Well, in 2020, when everything shut down for a while there, and there were a lot of Kickstarters, I think maybe I'd like a half a dozen, if there were creators out there. So yeah, it's they're all, so many ways to go now. You have the guys, the creators on like Substack or whatnot. There's so many publishers out there. If you got the good work, people will find it somehow. And so, I'm definitely looking forward to getting into Reburn now that I've got it. I'll turn through that quickly. I'm certain.
Yeah.
So, what are you reading right now that you would recommend, or do you have time for reading with 3 kids and writing 3 books at a time? When's the last time you really sank into a comic?
But here's the thing. So I'm reading scripts all the time for work, right?
Sure.
So, and I have a large collection of like a library of all the comics and stuff, but generally I tend to err on the side of novels and, nonfiction and fiction as a way to kind of feed my, creativity and everything else. So as much as I work in comics, I still read them, but I generally are more likely to read a novel. So I'm reading like The Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut right now.
Okay.
And that just kind of allows me like a headspace to play, in that world, and then, get better at what I do.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I try to do 52 books a year in terms of reading. So always
it's way
reading.
Too ambitious for me.
Well, this year it's been derailed by comics for the podcast, because I'm like, not only am I reading my current pull list, I'm going back and rereading stuff in a much more analytical way because I'm note taking as I go. But I'm falling behind. But yeah, there's always great books out there. That, and it's like there's such a fire hose of new books to read that I feel like there are gaps in my reading where no one made me read it in high school, and I haven't had time to read it since then, but it's a classic and I know I should have.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World.
Wow. So my God. Either of those.
What?
No, wait. I did read. I didn't have to read either of those, but I did go read them.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes.
No, what you want to do is
I went
at
to
the beginning
school.
at the beginning of the summer, if you got a brick and mortar bookshop near you, there's almost always a table that's like typical summer reading books, and books like, Fahrenheit 451, things like that. Those are almost always there. You should go through that and be like, okay, which ones did I not have to read in high school? Because those are the ones that they do kind of inform just the general pop culture kind of firmament.
Animal Farm. I think everybody needs to read Animal Farm. That's one of those like little ones that's easy to miss. It's just like, I don't know, but it's so relevant.
It's unfortunately still relevant. You would think things like Fahrenheit 451 or 1984, like these books would at some point stop being relevant. They just become historical works of fiction, as opposed to reading them again and being like, oh wow, man, this is great. This is crazy how this is still happening.
I know.
It'd be nice if we could get past it. Yeah.
Exactly. And now we have Margaret Atwood telling those stories again. And Testament was very bang on.
Yeah. Handmaid's Tale, things like that. You're like, this is supposed to be dystopian future. It's not supposed to be the actual present.
Yeah.
There's a guy I read, trying to remember his name now, Neil Postman, I think it was, who wrote in the 80s. I think his book was called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And he actually said, like, we all grew up reading, which is, Orwell and Huxley, Brave New World. And we thought, oh, those are both dystopian futures. And he said they're actually complete opposite visions, because Orwell believed, like, there's going to be some tyrant, some oppressor who will, come down and strip you of everything. And Huxley envisioned this future where we are all so distracted. There's so much entertainment. He didn't know about smartphones or the internet or anything when Huxley wrote that, but he said we will be so distracted by the things around us that, we lose our ability to think and we lose our autonomy that way. And there are actually two different ways to arrive at dystopia. And I find that the Orwellian one is much more popular in literature and comics and things like that. I think sometimes it hits a little too close to home to say, to point out the self-destructive nature that we have.
Yeah.
Which, but Grass Kings kind of talks about the self-destructive nature in a subversive way. The beginning of each issue, when it's giving the history of the land, it's just showing, like, there's always conflict. And there's nothing really special about that land. That's just people. That's what we do. We can't go 50 plus years without destroying ourselves. And,
isn't that wonderful?
I know.
Seriously.
So a really inspiring statement that you got to color.
Real cheery thought there.
That's good stuff. All good. I love that. I'm happy to paint that.
I was happy to paint it. Yeah.
No, that's where I live. That's like, I mean, no, I don't live in misery, but I love, I drink up that darkness. That's like, I love that.
Well, and you have an outlet for it. With the creativity and the painting. Hopefully that gets some of it out of your system.
I said part of the emotion you say you like to try to capture there. So something that's big swings in emotion, big, sorrow, despair, or something like that. You're saying that those are the kind of things, the kind of scenes that you really like to get into.
Yeah, exactly. It's the emotion. I mean, it's like why you love Euphoria. It's that it's got a lot of heaviness, but it's delicious. It's just that darkness. It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I am always drawn to those darker feelings, in my music, in my movies, in my comics. But I always feel like they also have to be earned. I don't like something that is just bleak for the sake of being bleak.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Grass Kings, for instance, you get enough backstory on your main character. It's Robert who lost his daughter, right?
Yeah.
It's Robert.
Robert
lost his daughter. And it's like, if we started with him just moping around the town for 6 issues or something like that, and we were supposed to connect with him or feel that vibe without any reason for it, I don't think that works. But understanding that reason, understanding he's tried to work through it, he's tried to push past it, and he just doesn't have the capacity to do it. I think that's where you really start to feel it and you join him there emotionally.
Yeah.
I just thought that one was particularly well done. We could go in detail. I know Alex could go deep on Black Badge. I dropped out of Scouts the first time they had me do something I didn't want to do, which I think was like 2nd grade. It was making a birdhouse, and I was terrible at it. And I was like, I'm done. I'm out. And ever since then, I've celebrated the great indoors. But I will return to Black Badge and finish it. And I'd love to patch the delivery service.
That was fun.
Yeah. But we were only here to talk about Grass Kings, and we've taken plenty of your time. So if there's anything else you'd like to share with Grass King fans, feel free to do so now. Otherwise, we will let you get back to the 3 books, the 3 kids, everything in your life that comes in threes.
The 3s. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. No, I mean, as far as Grass Kings goes, it's been great to chat about it. I haven't visited that world in a while, so it's nice to revisit again. So thank you guys.
Yeah, and I feel like you don't seem like someone who would return to a premise or a book, but there's plenty of room in the Grass Kingdom for another story.
Yeah.
We left with the brothers kind of divided and separated, never reconciled on page. One went back to Carlisle and is running for sheriff, and the other one has kind of taken the throne again of the Grass Kingdom. You've got new characters there. I mean, all it takes is one new person to wander into the Grass Kingdom, and bam, you got another story.
You could, but I'm a pretty strong believer in like it's powerful in how it was delivered, and it's it's finished up. I mean, as much as there is possible other avenues it could go, it's beautiful and it's finished. It's a mini, it's just a package all in its own. You don't need to like bleed it out.
That's how I feel, especially when I pay to have them bound like this. And then they're like, releasing a Grass Kings one shot. And I'm like, it's not going to fit in here now. But I would imagine lots of studios would prefer you to return to existing properties for name recognition, adding people to pull lists, things like that. It sounds like Boom does not pressure you to do any such thing.
No, I haven't worked with them in a while. I generally am with Dark Horse right now, but I mean, I'm also with other guys.
That's right.
Yeah. But it's more, our focus is more like coming up with more ideas and producing more stories and, keep making more content that's different genres sometimes, and just keep putting out stuff that is new and interesting.
Excellent.
I definitely can't wait to see what you guys have next. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely cannot wait to see.
All right.
Thanks,
well,
guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. And when we finish Reburn, we may be tweeting at you again to see if you want to come talk about that or whatever comes next.
100%. Yeah. The ladies they were thrilled that you were interested in it, and I'm sure they would love to talk to you about it as well.
That'd be awesome.
Group.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, we spend all our time talking about creators, so it's really nice to talk to a creator. Our little podcast is only a month old now, and you are our first official guest, and I can't imagine anything more exciting.
No way! Thank you.
Thank you.
This is my third comic podcast, but this is like a new one that we just started. Yeah. We started recording a few months ago. We released the first one just 31 days ago. Wow. And I think, as I indicated, we're recording 2 to 3 months ahead of schedule at this point. So
good for you. Congrats, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's not quite juggling 3 comic books on hard deadlines. These are all self-imposed deadlines.
I do other stuff too. I mean,
it looks like nothing on your wall behind you looks necessarily like a comic book.
Well, these are all
the ones that your head was blocking.
They look like the ones in the middle that look like they're paneled. You got like the kind of a 3-panel action there, maybe a half splash and a panel at the bottom there. No,
I was looking off to the right.
Yeah. Well, whatever that is, that definitely looks. That looks good.
Look
at Alex. He's trying to read it right now.
I am.
It's not going to be out for months and months.
Yeah, right. There's like this too. This is like a bag of all the pages, weighs like 50 pounds. So there's always something going on.
Always something somewhere, isn't it?
Awesome. Well, we're going to tell everyone listening, when you see the name Hilary Jenkins, add it to your pull list. Go to comicconart.com. Buy it all. It's all incredible. I think now that I know that there's not just paint on the page for King of Nowhere, I'm really going to go on an Easter egg hunt and see how weird it gets.
Try to find the one with the coffee stain on it, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, and then finally, do you from any website or your own website, do you take commissions if people wanted to get in touch with you that way?
Yeah, I do. I mean, generally my specialty is kind of in the landscape, kind of environmental realm. And so I've done a lot of commissions that way in terms of like scenes and environments and stuff. So I'm on Instagram at hilary.jenkins.art. And that's where you can find me, and all my information and stuff is there. And a lot of examples of what I do is there too. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, hopefully more people will be coming your way. And I can't say enough how much we appreciate taking an hour to talk with us.
Oh yeah, no problem, guys.
Really great way to wrap up this book, and I think we will be returning to another Tyler Hilary collaboration in 2023. So we'll give you a shout out when we do.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, have a good one.
You too.